Namaste and welcome to this edition of Live, Love, Engage that was intended to go live, but technical difficulties reared their ugly head. So, for those of you listening to this broadcast, you won't notice a thing. And for those of you who are watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, well, this is take two. Here we go. So, I am delighted to have a lovely woman with us today. I want to welcome Marylyn King to Live, Love, Engage, and then I'm going to tell you all about her. So, welcome, Marylyn, first off.
Well, thank you, Gloria, for having me.
Well, I'm so glad you are here. Marylyn and I are, shall we say, I had a better way of saying this before, but we're really in alignment. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. Yes, we're in alignment with uh, the messages that we share, which is what we're going to be talking about today. But let me share with you a little bit about why I have her on the show today. So, she brings decades of experience in mentoring and communication to her coaching of entrepreneurs. And in corporate management, she built teams from organizations in disarray. And now she distills the knowledge of experts for others to understand, and her novel approach to marketing makes it as natural as talking to a friend, which I know as someone who has been an entrepreneur for a long time and has worked with clients, knows that sometimes marketing can be really challenging and you don't quite know what to say. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second, but I would love for you to share with our listeners and those watching on YouTube in particular, and Facebook as well, and LinkedIn, all those good places. If you could share with us what what's your entrepreneurial journey, since you did start out in corporate America, what brought you to the place you are today doing the work you do?
Well, it's an interesting question that, so many people have earth-shattering answers for, that, lightning struck me at this point and I knew here's what I was going to do. For me, it was just a gradual and natural evolution. In the corporate environment, I had always mentored others, whether it was informal or formal when I was in management positions. In fact, before, if I go way back to my early professional days, before I got into corporate, I was a teacher. And if I go even way, way back, and this will reveal my age, when I was growing up as a young child in the late 1950s and early 60s, but mostly I remember my early childhood. So this would have been in the late 1950s. I just thought as a little girl, I had three choices in a career, and I don't even know why I thought career, but I just thought, okay, I can either be, if I want to be a professional, I could be a secretary or a nurse or a teacher. And the secretary thing just sounded boring to me. A nurse sounded scary to me. And teacher, I thought, yeah, I want to be a teacher. And so I did become a teacher. And then I went into corporate and continued just my natural teaching inclinations there, mentoring peers, moving into management, and really nurturing my staff members. And then, after several decades of that, I thought, I've done a great job, I think, and I've enjoyed it. And now it's time to apply those skills in a different area where I felt a lot more personal connection. So rather than using my skills to advance a corporate goal or set of goals, I wanted just to help individuals achieve their goals. So I just turned to individual entrepreneurs that I see as having so much fascinating expertise And usually that expertise does not spill over into being able to market themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear them so often say things like, oh, I wish I could just do what I love to do and not have to worry about marketing.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't we
So,
all?
so my take is, let's make marketing part of what you love to do. If you share very naturally what you love about your business, then marketing does become just as natural as talking to a friend.
Mm. Why do you think it is that so many people have this idea that marketing has to be hard? I think, and that they really, I think also in that they're just unsure about what to say.
Well, I think there are a lot of reasons for that. And one of them is the marketing industry itself. I mean, it in general, it says, like, one of the first questions out of the gate, so many marketing experts will either ask you or they'll say, this is the first thing you have to do. The way they word it is, well, identify your target market. And so, first of all, I have an issue with that terminology. I don't want to think of the people that I serve as targets.
I know.
I am not targeting them. They are not targets. They are people with unique skills and interests and passions, and they have a purpose that they want to pursue. They're not targets. So that's very off-putting, not only to me, but to the people that resonate with my message. I hear that a lot. So that's one of the reasons. And then part of that too is that, how do you know? So even if we change the terminology from target market to ideal audience, doesn't that sound a lot better, first of all?
Absolutely.
So then we say, but how do you even know who your ideal audience is until you know yourself and what you uniquely have to offer? What do you bring to the table that nobody else does? And the marketing industry in general tends to just skip over that entirely. So first they want you to identify your target market. Then they say, sell them what they want. And again, the emphasis is on selling. And I just look at that two steps, those first two steps is, well, where am I in this process? And I think that's what a lot of entrepreneurs, very heart-centered entrepreneurs are thinking is, well, where am I?
Right.
And then that third step that marketing industry says is then, beat the competition with your unique value proposition. And often it's, comparing yourself to others in your area of expertise. And then, how can you one up them? And, that whole mentality I find offensive. And I think many people do. So they think, well, that's marketing. Therefore, I hate marketing and I don't want to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I have that idea actually, especially about selling at first, because when I first got into business and then realized that, oh, I have to actually sell my services, it's like, oh, for some reason I was like having this disconnect with it. And then I was like, oh, but I don't like the idea of selling. But once I started working with some other coaches and learned it's to kind of swap that around, that thinking, to feel like it's more of an inviting people to work with you as opposed to selling it. And I think that's part of this marketing idea as well, as there's what you were describing is like this very masculine, dog eat dog world kind of competition thing, but to come at it from a more of a feminine style. And this applies to, men can do this as well as women, because we all have male and female, masculine and feminine attributes in us. I think to be able to come at it from a softer and more inviting way is really powerful. So how do you advise clients to start going about doing that? Because again, it seems, they have this one idea of this is the way I've got to market, but you've got a different idea. So how do you coach
Well,
people
I'm
with
glad
that?
you asked, Gloria, because I just flipped that whole model upside down and shifted the entire intention. So instead of, like in that traditional model that I just discussed, your quote unique value proposition, which is interestingly enough often called your unique selling proposition.
Yes, that's true.
So again, the emphasis is on selling. How are you going to sell these people? I just say, okay, that's where maybe you begin to look at yourself. But again, the model tends to look more at comparison with others. I just say, let's flip it upside down and start with you. So in my process that I call natural expression marketing, we start with what is your distinctive essence? And that's a part, it includes your business, but it's much more than just your business. It is your whole presence. It is that unique experience that people only have with you that they don't have with anyone else. And so, I haven't encountered anyone yet that is the only person in the world that does what they do, right?
Right.
So there are many other people. And so when we look at our ideal audience, who do we want to serve? They have a lot of choices. It can be you, or it can be thousands or even millions of other people to choose from. And regardless of who they choose, they're going to have a different experience because of what the distinctive essence is of that person. So my process is, let's start with identifying your distinctive essence. And that includes your character and your expertise and your purpose. What are you really trying to achieve, and why is that important for you? And then you have a better understanding of what you bring to the table and who will appreciate that about you. So then the second step is identify and engage with your ideal audience. So your ideal audience is going to be people that, first of all, need what you have to offer. And then even, equally important, appreciate your distinctive essence. So in your marketing, you need to reveal that distinctive essence right from the get-go so that they can identify you as, you're the person I want to work with.
Yeah.
And then the third step, instead of selling, I like your word, Gloria, invite. It's really, once you know yourself very well and you've engaged with your ideal audience to really understand them, and not just, what it is they want to buy, but why? What are their problems? What are their concerns? What are their aspirations? What kinds of beliefs do they have about themselves that that you may need to address to show them they really can achieve their aspirations? All of that, you put those things together, your essence and your ideal audience, and then you say, this is how I can best serve those people. Let me invite them into my offerings.
As you were saying that, I was starting to think about something I've discovered in my business. Just thinking about, I was working with a client yesterday, and she was describing her personality, and it's like, oh yeah, I can relate to that so much, because yeah, I do the same types of things. Do you find that as you are discovering your own uniqueness and then trying to figure out the clients that you want to serve, that a lot of times, maybe not necessarily always, because again, it depends on what types of business you're in, but do you find that we are selling to ourselves sometimes? And I know I'm using selling again, but let's just say we're the people that we want to work with, when we put it that way instead, are often a reflection of ourselves. Do you find that?
Yes, I do think that is true in to a large extent.
Mhm.
And I would just add a caveat to that, though, that it's maybe rather than seeing them as ourselves, seeing someone who maybe is our former self, for one
Yes.
thing.
Right, right.
One of the things I've learned so emphatically from another expert in marketing, Donald Miller, is that you need to demonstrate both empathy with your audience, so you understand them and they realize that you understand them, but also authority. You need to demonstrate that you have the competence to guide them where they want to go. And if they're too much like you,
Yeah.
then yes, you can be friends and have a great relationship, but they may not ever purchase any of your services
Right.
because you're just kind of all in it together.
Mhm.
So that's really the only caveat I would ask is, yes, identify, but don't over-identify. You need
Mhm.
to also have something to offer them that is of value to them that they don't have on their own.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, because it's I know when I've talked with other coaches and things about putting together, say, a group coaching program or a mastermind, is that you always want to be at least, one or two steps ahead of the clients that you want to bring in, so that you are able to, you can identify with, oh yes, I know where you've been, or I know where you are right now because I've been there, and I've been able to now overcome that, or through my method, I can
Right.
now show you where to go. And so
Right.
I appreciate you clarifying that for me. Let me ask you, if someone listening to this, do you, how do you think possibly that they might try to execute this and get it wrong?
And get it wrong?
Yeah,
Is that what you asked?
yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Well, I think, for one thing, if they try to look into themselves, they may, first of all, be very superficial about, well, what is my personality? And thinking that's my distinctive essence.
Mm.
Personality is one ingredient, but it's not the be all and end all. So that's one thing. Another thing, people often, I hear them really fall back on strictly their expertise. I have asked people, so, what, why would I hire you, for
Right,
example,
right,
to solve this problem I have? And they start going into the credentials that they have or the years of experience that they have. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, lots of people have those credentials, lots of
right,
people have experience. You haven't told me what your distinctive essence is.
exactly, yes.
So when people try to do it on their own, I think they, for one thing, miss a lot of the pieces. And another thing I find in working with clients is that there is so much self-discovery that happens in the course of a discussion with a guide who is skilled at this, asking the right questions, listening actively, and being able to reflect accurately. I love it when I hear people say, oh, I've never said that out loud before. I didn't realize that. or I've always been afraid to say that. And now they do. And once they say it through our coaching sessions, they realize the power in that.
Yeah.
So I think, when people struggle on their own trying to do it, they miss pieces. They, there's no one there to help them remove those barriers that they have built around themselves to really see who they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. One of the things that I wrote about in my book was about the importance of valuing your uniqueness. And that was one of the parts of the book that I had the most trouble writing, because I was still not valuing my own uniqueness, because for one thing, sometimes we take for granted the things that we're good at, and we don't realize that other people would really love to be able to do what we do. And I think that's part of it. And like you said, it's sometimes we have blinders on, and that's where working with someone like you, or me, I'll say that too,
or you,
working with a coach is so useful, because I've experienced the same thing when I've worked with a coach, and someone would say that, did you hear what you just said? And I'd be like, no, what did I say? And they would repeat it back to me. And I was like, oh, wow. Because we don't often hear those things. What do you love the most about the work that you're doing?
Well, I love seeing the lights go on in my clients when they realize, something of really a unique value in themselves, and realizing or getting to that point of clarity of who is it that would really appreciate what I have to offer. So I love that. I love seeing those lights go on in them. I love also, just for my own sake, I'm a lifelong learner. And so I love learning about all the various fields of expertise that my clients have. I've worked with, people from like personal photography to energy healing to other business coaches, just the whole gamut. And it's like, oh, I didn't know about that. I didn't know about that. So it continues to expand my world, and I love that.
That's awesome. I do that's one of the reasons why I do this podcast as well, is because I get to meet unique people doing unique work in the world, and it's such a pleasure for me. I want to ask you, since you have a world of experience in marketing, and even from the corporate world, what is a commonly held belief, maybe about business or even marketing in general, that you passionately disagree with?
Oh, okay. So it really comes back to what I was saying about the way the marketing industry as a whole teaches marketing. And I think the underlying belief in that is that you have to be a certain kind of person to market successfully, and you have to do certain things a certain way. And I passionately disagree, because I think the most effective marketing is authentic marketing. And so I would say, the complete opposite, that to be an effective marketer, you need to be authentic to yourself. You need to have the genuine interest of your audience in mind, rather than targeting them, which sounds like you're going to shoot them. So no, we're not shooting our audience. We have their best interest in mind. And so, I think back also to my very first paying client, after I had done a few pre-work with people that volunteered to be my pilot clients at no charge, just to give me the experience of, can I really apply these skills in this new context? But my first paying client loved seeing what I had done with those pilot clients and how I was showing up authentically. And she said, I hired you because I want to know how I can show up authentically in my business the way you do. She had taken so many programs before that were all trying to teach her a specific methodology. Not really a methodology. Mine is the methodology that allows for individual differences. She had taken courses and programs that were teaching a specific tactic. And of course, tactics are important. We need to, at some point, pick a tactic and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. But that comes way down the line, I think, in order for it to really be effective, because it needs to be a tactic that aligns with who you are and who your audience is. So she had taken all these other things that were trying to teach her to be a certain way, and she was totally confused and uncomfortable. So,
well, I'm glad that she was able to find you and to hire you because of that. Now, you were mentioning authentic, and I know some people say that, because I've seen like articles online that, oh, this authentic stuff has been overblown. So what I would love for you to do is tell me, what is your definition of authentic, when it comes to, or being authentic when it comes to.
well, very good question, Gloria. And I actually distinguish between your default behavior and your authentic best behavior. And so when I see the word authenticity thrown around a lot, as we all do, I think so often it's really an excuse for just being default and sloppy, actually, instead of being intentional and aligned with who you are. It's, I think it gets misused to mean, oh, I don't care what anybody thinks, and it even translates for me like, I don't even care what I think about myself. I'm just gonna,
Let it all out kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And whereas in my process, I guide people to identify and then live their authentic best, which is really being true to your values, which means you have to first do that deep work of identifying your values.
Yeah.
And then being intentional to say, whatever I say and do, I want them to be aligned with those values. And that's your authentic best. And that's far removed from this, sloppiness, I don't care how I come across attitude.
Thank you for that. I love that distinction. That is so good. I appreciate that. Actually, I was going to ask you one thing, but I'm going to ask this. When you made this transition from the corporate world to entrepreneur, because I know there are still people probably listening to this who may even be considering doing that if they're not an entrepreneur already. What were maybe what was one of your biggest challenges that you faced in that, and how did you overcome it?
That's a hard question. And I think, this comes down to what we were saying before about how much do you identify with your audience. I would say my biggest challenge was understanding what my distinctive essence was and how it could be of value to someone else. And I did struggle with that, and before I actually made the shift to becoming an entrepreneur, I literally spent years kind of immersing myself in this entrepreneurial world, and I purchased some courses that, of course, ask you right off, well, who's your target audience? I thought, well, heck if I know. I don't even know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I had purchased courses. I had watched, a gazillion free webinars and master classes and, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, okay, I get the tactic they're talking about. I understand it. I understand the ethos of being an entrepreneur. It's all exciting to me and that sort of thing. But I still wrestled with, but what am I going to do? I don't want to teach someone what I have done. And I don't want to just continue doing that exact same thing, say, as a consultant. I wanted to change my whole situation, but of course, leverage all those skills that I had acquired and was very proud of.
Yeah.
And so my big challenge was, so what do I do? And finally, after several years, I invested in a high-end business coaching program. And I just said, okay, I've been toying with the idea for several years, but I don't know what I'm going to do. And if I'm ever going to do it, I'm going to need some real one-on-one high-end advice. So that's what I did. And that's how I came up with how I could pull these things together and what I had to offer. And it's interesting. I tend to not use this term because it causes so much confusion, but maybe in this context it won't. I just, started doing all this research, and I didn't actually use the phrase distinctive essence then the way I do now, which I really love. I feel like that expresses it, and people have been very favorably responsive to that. But I was looking into other things, your unique value, blah, blah, blah. And I stumbled upon the term that I had never heard before, which now I realize is pretty common, and that is personal brand. And so then it was all through Google search. And so the more I searched on that and articles I read, I thought, yeah, that's really what I'm doing. But I don't use that term because it's still very misunderstood. And when people hear brand, the first thing they think is logos and colors and, images on their website. And, and that's not at all what I do. Or they think, oh, personal brand, that's just for celebrities. Everybody knows, who Beyonce is. She has a personal brand, but I don't need one. And I say, well, actually, everybody has a personal brand, whether they know it or not, whether it's the brand they want it to be or not, whether it's their authentic best personal brand or not, because really your personal brand is how people experience you. And everyone experiences you. So it really takes, I think, conscious intention to look into, how do people experience me? And is that really aligned with my values? Am I projecting my authentic best?
I love that answer. And I don't know about the rest of you listening. I hope that you've been getting tremendous value out of it, because it's just reconfirming everything that I have learned over the years as well. And it's just so valuable what you've been talking about. And I just want to bring up the point that, again, where I resonate with you is that you had this idea, you wanted to do something, but you weren't quite sure, and you were taking all these courses and doing that. And finally it took hiring a coach to be able to then help you to distill what was unique about you and how to be able to then market that in the world. So that's why no matter where you are in life, at some point, it just so pays to be able to work with a coach because they can really help you with those blind spots that you don't see, and you need someone to be able to help you out with that. So I'm glad that you did that, and I'm glad you talked about that because I think it's so important. Um, we're going to wrap up in a second, but I want to ask you because I love asking people this question, and because I get such a variety of answers. So I want to know, what are you curious about right now?
I am curious to know whether a lot of people in the corporate environment, now that we hear about, the great resignation and all of that, I'm wondering if they are attuned to these kinds of values of being their authentic best. And if they are willing to take that into their environment, in the corporate environment. I'm working with a client right now who is very much in the corporate environment. And so I'm very curious to see, how is this great resignation that we're experiencing going to play out? Are people going to really value themselves and be more intentional about how they come across and whether the environment that they put themselves in nurtures their distinctive essence, or does it smother it?
Yeah, that will be interesting to see play out because it is something that companies are dealing with all across different industries and different sizes. And yeah, people are fed up with a lot of the ways that companies have been treating their employees. And so it's time for a change. And Lord knows we're experiencing a lot of changes in different aspects of our culture these days. And it's not always easy, but it is necessary. And so, um, well, life is change anyway. And so it just depends on what form it's taking place. But I so appreciate you being with us today and sharing this. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you about that you'd like to leave our listeners and viewers with today, related to, I guess, finding their distinctive expression?
Well, I think you've asked wonderful questions, Gloria. So I don't feel like there's anything, I'm just dying to tell people that I haven't talked about, other than to say I invite people to learn more about me. And I do have a free download for them, that it's at my website, theexpertofchoice.com/message. And, it will get them started thinking about some of these questions that we've discussed today, because it does carry that whole concept of the message you project is so much more than, just one of these flat, elevator pitch type things that,
Right.
again, I think just sounds very salesy.
Mm.
This is a lot more, it goes more in depth, I believe, to help you dig into, okay, what are some questions I need to ask myself in order to really craft a message that will resonate with my ideal audience and help me discover who my ideal audience is.
I may just take a look at it myself because it's always good to get another perspective. And even when you work with other coaches, it's sometimes good to find somebody new, and because they can shed some light on perhaps a different aspect of yourself that you weren't even aware of. So I'm curious, so I'm going to go check that
Oh,
out.
well, I'd love for you to, Gloria.
Well, I will Also, for those of you who are listening and watching, I'll have that in the show notes, or I might put it in the comments as well on social media. So you'll be sure to get that, since we weren't able to use StreamYard today for some strange reason. But, that's why we have backup plans. And that's why,
That's
thank
right.
goodness for Zoom, it worked out. So we were able to record this. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with our audience today, Marylyn. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you, Gloria. And you asked wonderful questions, so I appreciate you very much as well. And I love the message you carry to your audience. So I continue listening to you regularly.
Well, thank you so much. And I invite all of you who are listening, if this is your first time, I hope you will subscribe. And if you receive value out of this and you know somebody who is perhaps struggling with their message, and I invite you to share the link, if nothing else, to Marylyn's website, but definitely share this episode with them as well. And until next time, as always, I encourage you to go out and live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically with distinct expression. Ha ha.